So I want to welcome to the show, Jaguar Mary. Welcome.
Thank you. So great to be here.
I've been wanting you here for a while,
I
and
know. We've been working on this
yeah,
for maybe a year,
for
actually.
a year
Mhm,
exactly.
mhm.
It was amazing because I was first drawn to you because I was walking through the farmers market and I smelled mugwort. And I'm married to a mugwort bride, so when I smelled I have such a lineage with it in myself.
Yeah,
And thought,
yeah,
ooh,
yeah.
that's a family smell.
Yeah,
And I just turned,
yeah.
and then I saw like,
Tribe.
exactly, I saw Artemisia Negra, and I thought, okay, I have to go over there right
Yeah.
now. And so it was just felt very natural from that moment.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I went home and I went on your website, and I was scrolling through and I was seeing all these beautiful photos of you and the work you do. And then I found your bio, and there's about a paragraph from it I'm going to read so everyone can hear what I read and what really made me want to reach out and speak to you. And you write, and I'm starting from the middle of the paragraph, so it's not the whole piece of your sentiment. No doubt we are in troubling times now, and I believe that it is my role as an artist to activate and be part of a remembering of the transforming power of communal space. I agree with Nina Simone's dictum that the mission of the artist is to respond to the times in which I find myself. Improvisation in the context of my work arises from the experience of embodying the effects of the narrative. It's the intra-action that is being born during a performance. It's a form of attunement, an alchemy between all practitioners present, the artist and the audience members in the space. I explore tyranny as a program that attempts to delimit and homogenize the personality. Getting free may not mean overthrowing or impeaching despots. It may mean investigating the ways that tyranny works on our battered psyches every day. Whew. So even reading it now, like I feel it, and so I want to start
Yeah,
with that as an introduction to you,
yeah,
and tell
yeah.
us what that means to you. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, well, where it came from was a conversation I was having with an activist in New York City, and she was talking about becoming ungovernable. And I've since heard that from Marie Brown, from Emergent Strategies, and other people talking about this idea of becoming ungovernable. And so, what that meant to me, like I was definitely in a flow when I wrote that, because when I hear you say it, I'm just like, wow, yeah, I dig it, even though it came out of me, it's great to hear that as a memory, of some place in my own sort of source, that was alive in the moment of the writing that, was able to come out. So, yeah, so this idea of being ungovernable points to the fact that we are the ways that each of us is colonized. And so when I think about a tyranny, I think about a takeover, a complete takeover. And so I believe that, there are art forms, there are practices alive in us that aren't, they aren't out there, but they're alive in us, that can help us unravel from these hooks, really. They're hooks, psychic hooks. And it's really kind of up to us, because the hooks they're going to take a little bit longer to dissolve, but the ways that they live in our bodies are things that that I believe we have the power um, to disintegrate. And these are practices, these are daily activities that one needs to consider and lean into in order to become ungovernable, in order to put the tyranny in its right place. Because, like I said, it's not necessarily going to go away, but it can go to its right place where it has no effect on our ability to thrive and to feel joy and to take a moment to rest when we need. And the things that our bodies and our psyches need, that are calling for us to tend to, can be tended to, even though this kind of tyranny is there. These programs, these um, institutions, in some ways that are there, we can kind of like find our own ungovernable sphere to work within and to amplify for ourselves. you know. And doing it for ourselves also means we're doing it for community, and of course, as a ritual performance artist, I believe that doing it in community is one of the most powerful ways to feel that, have that composting going, where those energies are kind of going into the earth and kind of, draining away from us, so that the life that is our light, or the light that is our life, can shine even brighter.
Yeah, I love that so much. This is so timely because I interviewed a woman named Alelia Bundles. She's the great granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker, who was like
Oh
the
my
first. Yeah, so you know
gosh.
who that. So the first millionaire of America, who also happened to be a Black woman in the late 1800s. So
Wow.
she,
Yeah.
so and what I learned from her that was so powerful was there's this documentary called Self-Made that's about her
I've
on
seen it.
Netflix.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Alelia was saying that she would turn the title into mutually made, because she said that what made Madam C.J. Walker so successful was not anything that we saw in the film. It was her upbringing, where she was able to attune to other women and people of color who did not internalize the institution. And she literally used these words of like the sense of self-attunement was what helped her completely break out of any identity that had been internalized from actually being born on a plantation.
Mm.
So it was like this moment of everything you just said, of how there is this relationship. It is alive inside of us, like whether it exists outside or not, it's inside of us is where we have the direct access. And
Mhm.
that was just one example that blew my mind. So I'm just curious, when I say that back to you about that relationship to that thing inside of us, what does that look like for you? Like, where do you go with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, it's very sensory, and it has to do because part of one of my practices is movement. I was trained as a dancer and I did all this movement. So I had this way of knowing myself. And later, even though I'm not a quote unquote dancer, um, the kind of movement towards more somatic movement and vocalization has been really, really helpful. And, when I talk, another thing about being ungovernable is that I really enjoy the practice of speaking gibberish. And what that does to my brain really is, I think it creates a little bit more kind of neuroplasticity around accessing, the imagination, the part of me that is like um, sort of untouched in some ways. It's the thing that when I remove language, when I remove regimented language, I have like I still have this ability to vocalize and to free my vocal cords or free myself from meaning in some ways. And the practice of freeing myself from meaning is also a way to decolonize myself and to, um, it helps me to kind of dream a bit, dream through sound and these kind of vocal kind of glossolalia kinds of expression. Um, and, in terms of the movement, there's something that my teacher taught me, which my teacher in Sedona, Arizona, who is this incredible Black woman from Chicago who went to see like Babaji in India and spent all this time, it was just like this whole experience. Anyway, I met her in Sedona and she taught me this practice she called emotional movement. And we'd be out on the trail in Sedona walking, moving our bodies, walking, and she would start grunting and shaking and she would and it was very primal stuff, and it took me a minute to realize it was okay for me to find that expression in myself, because part of the lockdown on my own psyche has to do with, appropriateness and the proper use of sound and vocals and so it's all this stuff. And so she was really kind of shaking me out of that. And that's one of the things that I really That's a place, that's a go-to for me, like if I'm feeling, I can feel it in my body. I can feel my chest getting tighter. I can feel my my like the body is getting like weird, and I just have to like do this emotional movement that my teacher taught me, and find some release, and she was doing that every day all the time. And I was like, don't you just like, can you just like do it once a week and feel good? And she was, she was like, no, because you see what's out there, and a lot of what's out there is antithetical to, um, human joy, human brilliance, human connectivity, human possibility. So if we're making that for ourselves, we have to find these like, funky old, like easy to do kinds of things. You don't have to buy anything. You just use your voice, your sound, and your body. You feel your blood. You connect to the earth. All these things are very present for us.
Mm.
So
I mean, you're lighting me up. You're like saying all the words that I like to say and write about in practice. I mean, free from meaning, love it. I love ungovernable. I love untouched. I think of like Maya Angelou would often say, you have to find this place inside of yourself and keep it clean.
mm,
And I always think that's what she means. Is like
yeah.
no one can go there but you, and nothing can
Hmm.
permeate that but you, and you get to
Yeah.
just like indulge in that gooiness.
Hmm.
But the piece about the gibberish I found very important just now, because it takes me back to another conversation I had with this man, Tapiwa Gujia, and he was talking about how the languages, especially through colonization, he was specifically talking about, and I forget the name, but the indigenous language in Zimbabwe, the name for fruits, let's say, one in particular was called like tsuvu. That was named for this gorgeous dark purple fruit. And when the colonizers came, they called it something like snotty fingerberry. And and so in our session together, we were feeling into our body like, let's notice how it feels when we say tsuvu compared to snotty fingerberry. And it was like such a different somatic response. And I say that because there's so much meaning laced in the syllables and the pronunciation and the words and the lineage. They're like spells, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love the idea of breaking free of a language that has a lot tied to it. In a way, the ancestors, and maybe the oldest ancestor of the earth, gets to just speak right through us with the
Yeah.
gibberish. Is
Yeah.
that your experience?
Yeah, yeah, it's totally my experience. I used to actually describe it more as glossolalia simply because I had this thought. I was studying actually performance with, speaking in tongues, and I was learning that people considered it a direct relationship to God, who they considered to be God, and that God was speaking through them. And then it could be translated so that other people could understand it. Um, and for me, it's like, the energy of the mystery, you know, is swimming in us all the time. So it's not something that's out there coming into me and then I'm like releasing it to you. It's all happening all at once. It is always present. And so one just has to just play. So it's like the sense of play that feels extra important and also liberating, if that is like a huge pathway to personal liberation, the chance to play with language, to unravel, to like to allow meaning to disintegrate. It's like it is a letting go. It's a kind of letting go. you know um yeah, so when I'm sort of making stuff up and talking, all kinds of imagery can come through. It's not a specific. So, I don't have to say cat. I could say something else and some other image will come up that I wasn't expecting. So it's like the link
Mhm.
between the word and the thing has much more flexibility. It probably has like a deeper communication. I lived in an animist community, a Buddhist animist Hindu community for a while in Bali. And so things have energy and things have consciousness, so how do you pick that up? You play around, you're not going to use like, the colonized language that you were given. You're going to make up your own language maybe and create that kind of communication and engage in that form of play as liberation, as new world building,
Mm-hmm.
world building. So,
See, I love that because it makes me think of two things. I think of something I've talked about before, where if we think of like English language, like I'm hungry. It's so it's so spelled out in this way of like I'm owning this thing called hunger, rather than like relating to the being of hunger moving through me. And like in Spanish, it's like tengo hambre, like
yeah,
have
right.
on hunger. It's like
Yeah.
it's like two different worlds, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I find language so fascinating in its relationship to the soma, how older languages are so relational with the body. It's like they're speaking to the body and to the earth through just the way a sentence is formed.
Yeah.
And the more modern or colonized or English languages are much more about a sense of ownership. So I'm feeling that as you're saying it. And when I'm thinking of being able to speak sounds and formations and shapes through my mouth, there's such a somatic experience around that and an opening, which releases all that trauma and stress essentially, rather than the words, which keeps tightening it up.
Yeah.
And I just want to ask you, you're familiar with Meredith Monk?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd
Yeah,
be, I
yeah,
was
yeah.
shocked if
Yeah,
you
no,
would.
that's fine. No, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I spent a weekend with her at this monastery with like a group of people for a retreat. And it was this amazing experience. Like when you said you were with your teacher in Sedona and took you a second, I remember that feeling of like, I have to unlearn and uncondition and make strange shapes with my body based on
Yeah.
emotion and let the sound come out. All these primal things that my indigenous roots know, but
Yeah.
this like, colonized self was so about appropriateness. So I just wanted to reflect that back. 'Cause I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you want to add anything to that before we move on.
Oh, gosh. No, I feel, you know, like it's in some ways this conversation needs to be repeated over and over and over again, but I also feel really complete right now, in terms of us right here um, in this Zoom form.
Well,
Like if we were in person, we could like go into the forest and dance and make
oh
crazy
yes.
sounds or whatever. But yeah.
Well, where it's taking me is what you brought up before I hit record, because I'm
Mhm.
thinking of like the word appropriateness, I'm thinking of like ungovernable, and I'm thinking of this experience you're going through with receiving something.
Yeah.
And something in you is like, but I don't want the conditions attached to receiving it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I told you my audience is really interested in like fawning and not
Yeah.
fawning anymore. And what do you want to share about this experience we could talk about?
Yeah, well, one of the things I observed because I received a letter that I'd been selected as the Distinguished Artist of Kingston for the next 2 years. And so the letter also said, congratulations, all these great people also were considered and you won. And then, and then, and then it said, we request that you make a couple of new artworks in the 2 years that you are distinguished artist. And we have a $500 stipend and maybe more, but probably not. So there you go. And I told my mom, and my mom was like, oh, you have to take that. And what I reflected on right then was that generationally, if someone offers you an award, if someone acknowledges you, if someone glances your way,
Mm,
you need to respond somehow, you know?
mhm.
And likewise, I've been taking my time with responding and saying yes. And I actually, right before we got on together, I was typing out a letter, like this long letter where I'm just talking about stuff. But um, so I'm not doing this immediate, like, oh my God, this is so great. Yes, 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 yes. I'm not on the phone. I'm not like doing all this stuff because I was just like, well, we're evolving as a species, and I know that we are in a place in New York State because there was just this guaranteed artist income initiative that thousands of people applied for, and it's like 2 years of like a living income and all this stuff. I know that that's where we're going. I know that cultural workers and artists are becoming more and more valued and respected and needed, you know? And so that comes with not just the acknowledgement of, I see you're a great artist, and, we want to put this kind of Black queer person up, on this pedestal and say, here's our distinguished artist. But in terms of what I'm feeling inside, so this may be perfect for someone else, but for what I'm feeling inside, I was just thinking, like I have to really do something else. I have to say something else. I have to put my money where my mouth is. I have to, if I'm talking about value, if I'm talking about discernment, if I'm talking about self-care, if I'm starting first with an honoring of myself, as opposed to someone else honoring me, then what does that mean? And what it means right now for me is just, just to kind of counter the request with another request that says, well, actually, I would prefer, since I'm working all the time, I'm doing cultural work all the time. I've been doing it for 30 years, that you feel that it's sufficient enough to just give me the award with no strings attached, I mean, that would be great.
Yeah.
That's what the letter is going to say, basically, in kind of like a diplomatic form. I do believe that we can be firm and diplomatic at the same time. And I do believe that it's like super important when these like special quote unquote honors come up that we use incredible discernment, because we are deciding how we're going to participate. And that is part of being ungovernable as well. So that our participation is somewhat measured when we are dealing with these older institutions that feel like they need to do things the same way and assuming that you're going to just kind of fall in line. And so these changes are happening right now for all of us. And I feel like I would be doing a disservice, not just to myself, but to my entire community if I didn't respond, with, these are my concerns, thank you. And these are my concerns.
I love that. I loved two, as many things you said. Two I'm kind of grabbing was the generational reflex
Yeah.
of right thinking, like I have to take whatever I'm given,
Mm-hmm.
without asking if I even want what I'm given.
Yeah.
And
Right. Right. Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
powerful, because that's again, this fourth trauma response is only just recently being acknowledged, is this fawn response, where
Mm-hmm.
we just reflexively mechanically appease whatever it is across from us. It seems like giving us some sense of power or security,
Yeah.
even against our own boundaries, and it could be even violating to us, and we don't feel the violation because in a trauma response we're numb to it, so we're just
Mm-hmm.
performing. So when you talk about this awareness of, something in you is, you said it to me earlier, something in you is like rubbing. I just want everyone to hear that, because I think when there's a rub, it's like if there's a practice of listening to the rub, there's
Yeah.
so much information there, instead of, like you said, reflexively, yes, oh my gosh, so exciting, and tell everybody. It's like,
Yeah.
let's sit with the rub and see what that wants.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
you're
mean, the other
clear,
reason, yeah,
right?
the other reason why I had to sit and meditate about it is because I was furious, actually. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Maybe like, I don't know, 20, maybe even 10, or maybe even like 5 years ago, I may not have felt this fury. But this is where we are. This is how far we've come, that someone could present me with this, you know, opportunity, or make an offering, and that I could be furious about it, you know.
Mm, mhm. I
So
I just want everyone to hear that part, because it's such talk about decolonizing the psyche, right? It's
yeah.
like to know I could be getting I could be being valued by somebody else and be given an honor and be given a great opportunity, something I've always wanted even.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And the conditions attached to the situation, my boundary of anger could come up, something in me could
yeah,
be like, this is not good for me.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
that's so
yeah,
powerful. Again, instead of bypassing for, well, I must take what I'm being given, it's in that pause that I find that we start healing that fawn mechanism. Because
yeah,
you're, I mean, I'm wondering for you, if I think of examples for me that I've been through this, I like sensationally just drink in the feeling of being seen, like let's say by the person, institution, whatever it is. I was acknowledged, I was noticed, I was valued. Oh, I feel so good. And then I equally drink in the and no thank you. And
yeah.
so, so I'm just lit up with my no thank you and my
Right,
thank
right.
you.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
is
yeah,
that what
yeah.
it's like? Is that what you're
Yeah,
feeling?
yeah, yeah. It feels very similar um, because it's exciting, right? To be like, I've been living in Kingston for 3 years, and I've been, doing my thing, and in the small ways that I do my thing, and then someone says, "Hey, we see you doing your thing, and it's really really awesome, and we want to acknowledge you." And so that feels, yes, that feels really awesome. And also, I guess like the Buddhist part of me is that it is like it's like you know there are many things that happen in our lives, many things that happen, and so we needn't, you know I mean, this is where I've come to, and I think it has sort of evolved through my various spiritual practices. But it's like I feel I feel like this is even bigger. They're making a bigger deal out of it than it actually is, you know? So, and they're inviting me to also make a bigger deal out of it than it actually is,
I love that. That's so good. I mean, wait, that's the perfect example of that sentence I loved, like investing. I'm gonna say it again because I want to say it as you said it, and as you wrote it. It may mean investigating the ways that tyranny works on our battered psyches every day. There's an internalized tyranny around thinking I have to take whatever I'm given.
Yeah.
And,
Hmm.
so to be able to investigate that and be like, oh, wait, they're just making a big deal out of something. And and like so, something in my conditioning says I'm supposed to match them and make a big deal out of it too.
Yeah,
But
right.
I don't
Yeah.
feel that way.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many ways that we can focus our attention and our hearts, like, this the act of making of attunement is really powerful. Like I could feel, it's through my own knowing of how it feels to be attuned, how that
Yes.
actually feels, the good feeling that I know. I look at this letter saying, "You got this," and you've got this award, and I'm just like, that's not in alignment. That's actually not in alignment with who I am right now. And we're going to have a conversation about that.
Hmm.
We're going to have a conversation. So, um,
The way you just said that, I just wanted to frame it because I thought it was so beautiful. Just like you can feel how attunement feels, right?
yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
again, for everyone listening that follows my work and all the people that come on this podcast around somatic psychology and trauma healing and indigenous healing, all these ways we go through the body and the earth and our spirits really to heal and release from trauma. This piece of attunement is super important because when you feel attunement and you feel misattunement, like when you know the sensations of those two in your body,
Mhm.
it's like the body is the best barometer and it's
Mhm.
instant.
Yeah.
And when I think of the colonized psyche, I think of the hundreds of years of training to bypass the feeling of not being attuned.
Mhm.
So what we're really doing here is we're not bypassing the feeling of not being attuned. We're noticing it and then we're settling into it to see what it shows us.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific practice that you love to do for that? Is it just so general, generally your life now, or is there something you could offer anyone listening?
That's a really good question. Um, My methods are very, very simple. Um, and mostly it has to do with breath.
Mm-hmm.
My main method really is breathing. And I, go through phases where I have time to do like a regular Kundalini breath practice. I'm not in that phase right now. So what that means is that, I might like stop wherever I am and just breathe, take a few breaths, you know. My teacher also taught me about conscious connected breathing, and I use that a lot. And what that is, taking it's short and it's incredibly grounding and recentering. It's 10 connected breaths, like through, in through the nose, out through the mouth, without any breaks. And so, in your own time. And so I feel like uh, that can be very, um, I find it to be kind of a quick fix in a way, like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling it in the moment and I just take, you know, breath is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. I think
Yeah.
I actually it's a great thing to offer everyone listening, because part of the biology of a trauma response is the loss of breath. Breath
Mm-hmm,
gets really
mm-hmm,
shallow, or when
mm-hmm.
stress is mounting and we get activated. And in that shallowness, literally becomes a numbness that starts happening in the core, like so much constriction that you start to lose sensation. And again, what we're talking about here is really our relationship to sensation. Because if we lose meaning, we just have sense, we just have felt
Mm-hmm.
experience. And
Yeah,
that's all we need.
yeah,
Meaning takes us out of felt experience and actually immobilizes us as we try to figure things out.
yeah,
But the breath, like if everyone listening can imagine, okay, you feel a rub, you feel something's off, just pausing and breathing into that 10 times. I mean, that's very powerful. It connects you to it.
yeah,
And then it shows you what it's asking for.
yeah,
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 I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Wow. I mean,
Mm.
this conversation has been so gooey. Like I feel like part two is going into the forest. We have to make a part two and
Yeah,
play
yeah,
in the
yeah,
woods.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's so beautiful. Is there anything, as we close, that you want to share or express or invite people to, anything you're doing or anything you want people to know about?
Oh, um, well, I am, I'm in sort of a um, very sort of productive phase at the moment. I have some projects that are happening in June, around Juneteenth. I'm celebrating and honoring our queer transcestors, so that is a way of sort of addressing the multiplicity of the Black experience. And also, that is part of how trauma shows up as well. It's like the fact that we assimilate, that we become hegemonic. It becomes important for us to sort of feel like we're one being moving in the same ways with the same beliefs and all of that. Whereas, the multiplicity is way more exciting and produces way more sort of beauty and expansiveness. And so and so that's part of the reason why I kind of bring in this imagining of like the different kinds of people who were present in Galveston, Texas, when they received the announcement that slavery had ended, like 2 years after it actually had ended. But there were all kinds of people there with all kinds of experience. And so I'm kind of calling that in and doing some events during the Juneteenth weekend on Saturday, the 18th and the 19th here in Kingston. And so you can check out my website, artandlifekingston.com. We can find out more information. And I'm probably going to be, I taught a really great workshop at the last O Positive on gibberish. I did a gibberish workshop. And so I'm going to revisit that in October. That's way down the line. But, there are things happening. You can follow me on Instagram, Jaguar Mary X.
Ooh, no, these are great. These are great things. I really appreciate your work and your
Thank
heart
you.
and your practice and sharing it with us today. It's been really nourishing for me. Thank you.
Oh, great. Likewise, it's great to have conversations.